See. All right, we're recording.
Well, hi, Corey. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So I wanted to discuss with you today a little bit about the PROMIS emotional distress short form that I was able to give you several weeks ago, and kind of discuss how that felt for you and go over some of the results that came from that.
Okay.
All right, so going back to the emotional distress short form, which is typically used to gauge anxiety in a client. Um, so looking back at your experience with taking the short form, how did those questions feel as you were answering?
Well, I think some of them were making me more anxious, quite honestly. To think about my anxiety or distress in a way that I'm actually reporting on it made me feel a little bit, I was re-feeling those feelings,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah, totally. So the short form actually created a sense of anxiousness while reporting while self-reporting your own
Kinda,
feelings.
kinda, yeah. To think back on how I was feeling, it kind of makes you feel those feelings again. And so I was probably more anxious when I filled out the scale than I was, 5 minutes before doing it.
Yeah, yes. And going with what you're saying about how the test kind of created, those feelings of anxiousness or elevated the feelings of angst. How did you perceive the test in general? Did you feel like it was fair towards you? I mean, how did you perceive the test?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really straightforward, easy to understand. I didn't have any difficulty with it. It's relatively short. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I mean, I didn't have any problem with the test itself. It was fine.
Okay, okay. And so just going over a little bit of how the procedure of that test is meant to go, you were giving seven items on a scale where you were able to answer them 1 through 5, which is never, rarely, sometimes, often, and always were options on how you could answer each item. And the way that the results of this test work is your the scale, there's a number assigned to each answerable item on the scale. So for never, there's a number 1 next to it. For rarely, there's a number 2, sometimes number 3, often number 4, and always is number 5. So whatever you answer to each item will actually will have a number attached to it, which we will then add up all of those numbers, which will give us a score. And then we will use that score to kind of get an idea of the extent of the anxiety that you may or may not be experiencing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I do want to go over the scores that you got on the short form here. So please stop me if you have any questions. I want to make sure that I am communicating this effectively. So if there's anything you don't understand, please feel free to ask.
Okay.
All right.
Mhm.
So for your total score on your assessment, you you scored a 25. All right. Now that number means nothing to you as of now. All right. 25 could mean high, it could mean low, it could mean in the middle. So I'm going to give you a little bit more context of what a 25 means in terms of this test here. So a 25 is then it is then turned into a score that we use to measure how whether you are in the ballpark of average, low, or high. All right. So in this sense here, I'll show you a little bit of a table that we use to interpret scores. There's a table here, and right around the raw score of 25, there is a T-score, and you don't have to really worry about the T-score and what that may be. I'll explain that at a later time. But the T-score comes out to 66.4. So what does 66.4 mean? On average, an average T-score is from between 45 to 55. So anything above that 55 level typically indicates above average. High, very high, or somewhere in that area. So with your T-score coming out to 66.4, that indicates a score that's slightly above average. Does that make sense?
So I'm more anxious than the average person.
Based on what your most recent results reflect, yes. Now, that does not mean in general across all points in life you are more anxious. All right, because remember, this test only reflects the last 7 days prior to you taking the test.
All right.
All right. So there could be a time where you take this test a month later and you aren't feeling in a similar manner. You may feel less worrisome, less anxious the next time you take it. So I don't want you to think that because I scored a certain score on this particular assessment that I am more anxious than everyone else. Because again, these things can change. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really just how anxious I feel at the time I'm taking the test.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, that's always subject to change.
All right.
All right. Now, going on to how the T-scores are interpreted with this particular short form. So any T-score that is less than 55 is indicative of having no to slight anxiety. Anything from 55 to 59.9 is indicative of mild anxiety. Anything from 60 to 69.9 indicates moderate anxiety, and 70 and over indicates severe anxiety in terms of this particular short form.
So I'm in the moderate group.
So yes.
Okay.
So the results of your most recent assessment, you fall within that moderate anxiety level.
Okay.
All right. So what I would like to do with you, Corey, is I'd like to revisit this assessment over time. Meaning maybe we will revisit this assessment 3 weeks from now. After we, work together on a treatment plan and, we collaborate on what things that you would like to do moving forward with counseling, I'd like to revisit this emotional distress short form and then see if the levels of anxiety have decreased, stayed the same, or increased. Because remember, this is just a reflection of the past 7 days, all right? Okay. This is not meant to diagnose anxiety. This is more to get an idea. There would need to be a more comprehensive assessment in order to say this person is dealing with, severe anxiety or moderate anxiety. This is more to give us an idea moving forward into our treatment. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Now I want to ask, now that I've reported these results to you, how do you feel about me reporting this to you?
Well, I guess I'm not surprised that I'm on the higher end of anxiety, because I certainly feel that way. And so, it's one thing to know where I stand right now, but of course, my whole goal in coming to counseling is to change that, is to learn how to, handle my situations in ways that don't cause me so much anxiety. So, on one hand, it makes perfect sense. On the other hand, it does sort of raise the question of what do I do about it? So I guess,
Yeah.
I guess I'm feeling both of those ways right now.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a little bit of wonder or curiosity about how we move forward from this. And a big part of this is I want to 100% include you in the future planning. You are the star of the show here. So I want to include you on what types of things would you like to see moving forward over the next several weeks?
Are you asking me that
Oh,
now?
yes, I'm sorry. Yes. So what types of things would you like to see moving forward? What
Well,
types of goals would you set?
my major goal is to learn how to get over the relationship problems that I've been having that I told you about last time,
Mhm.
and and maybe deal with them in a way that doesn't feel so overwhelming or feel so distressing. I mean, I know that there's always going to be challenges in relationships, and if not in relationships, then in work or, some other aspect of life. And one thing I just would like to be able to do is um, handle my anxiety better, so I don't feel quite so overwhelmed when things aren't going well. Just have some skills to deal with those things better.
Yeah, yeah. So I hear you saying that you just want the tools to be able to deal with this.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. So we will definitely be able to again collaborate together to make sure that we establish some coping mechanisms for anxiety, maybe some strategies, breathing techniques, things that you like to do as well, whether you like to be outside or spend time with family. We can really personalize this plan
Hmm.
to make sure that it is individualized to you, so that when you do feel anxious and worried, that you are able to pull upon your own inner resources to deal with that.
Hmm.
And that is what I'd like to do over the next two courses, the next two counseling sessions with you. I'd
Okay.
really like to start introducing some strategies for dealing with anxiety.
Yeah, I'd like that. That sounds really good.
Excellent, excellent. So again, I really want to reiterate to you that this is not set in stone. So again, I want to make sure we're both on the same page that this does not label you. This does not box you into a corner as this is what I am and this is what I'm always going to be. This is just a short assessment to help me gather additional information about what your experiences are. So over the next several weeks, I'd like to come back and retry this short form, this same specific one you've already completed, and see if anything in general has changed, to see if any of those fearful experiences have reduced.
Yeah.
So we will implement strategy to address the anxiety. And once we retest, it will allow me to have an idea of if the intervention strategies are working.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
All right, well, it looks like we're at time today for today's session. So again, we'll meet next week and we'll start working together on some of those stress relieving strategies. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I appreciate it.
All right. right, Corey. Thank you for coming in and meeting with me today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.